So, Buddha Dharma, some scholar described Buddhism is not religion, but science of mind. I think it's quite true, because the Buddhism, like any other non-theistic religion, the basic concept is law of causality, cause and effect, all like that. So the thing which we are very much concerned, that is suffering, pain, and joyful or pleasant, very happy.
Happiness.
So the pains and pleasure, these things are feeling. So feeling means part of our mind. So the causes of that, of course, external factors also there, but mainly within our own mind. So logically, in order to reduce suffering, pains, worry, sadness, fear, they ultimately depend on our mental attitude. So shaping new way our mind. Just a mere determination or mere wish, some extent is some effect, but that cannot sort of affect more profound way. So here, I think conviction, firm conviction, that is something important. Now, firm conviction must come out of analytical meditation. So therefore, the Buddhist way of approach is utilize human intelligence maximum way, through that way, transform our mind. So, now in Buddha Dharma, I think all Buddhist teaching based on Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths shade Dambashi shade Mindube Dungegi Chok, Gunin Yomo Chok, Dudechi, Tandu Dewa, Namjang Chok, Dudechi, Song Yimbre. Karislam the law of causality.
So when we speak of the Four Noble Truths, within the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, we recognize two sets of cause and effects. Yes.
No, Mama. Mare. What?
So when we speak of Four Noble Truths, essentially within the teachings of Four Noble Truths, we recognize two sets of cause and effects. One set that relates to the nature of suffering, that which we do not naturally desire, and also that suffering and its origin relates to one set that pertains to the afflicted class of phenomena or unenlightened existence, and a second set of cause and effects we find in the teachings on the Four Noble Truths relate to happiness, what we aspire for and what we wish to achieve, and that cause and effect category belongs to the class of enlightened phenomena or enlightened class.
Then, in Sanskrit tradition, the Shirvim Uttara, some then and things in Yambashuni. And Yambashushimegane, that's a two Pavajana Seda, and Shiribu, George Manche. Jenny, George Manche, and should be part of the symbol. Shidurla Bures and Chona, and the Landia, and didn't about Tao Chates. Pumbunga was that you're still Tomalayanda was just Tao. Tao Dosin Utsudua. Jenny, that she's Jim Doddy, somewhere now, and she'll be part of the Chimba, it's also in the area. She'll be part of the Chimba City, the condition Lamna, because Sikora, Shirp, said Tangua. The children of the Shirp, it's all cherry. Dumbam, Jicta, determination, Jic Digi, Jordra, Rugiarty, Ine, Zoti. Children of the Shirp could try the Java and Roquach. The name is an Shirp is all in door. She's part of Chimbas. So that dinner at the come day in Shirp Sunduzane, Tandam Shirp Shirp. Jir Gunzo of Shirp Yari, Tandam of Shirp Yari, dinner under the Tandam of Shirp, that's all she had. Tandam of Shirp Tayan, and Shirp is part of the Chimba in Yuala, and Chanju Sim is much go yare. Chanju Sim is Simbe, and it don't Muslim of a sheriff. Tell her, she'll be part of Chimbas and City yare. That should be part of the Chimbas, Adela, Diri Chimba, D Chimbas Chene. That Chanju later saw me. That dig under D Chimbe on the Chavina, Mother Casule, Chuju Simbe, Gulia, Church of Hagway Gulia, part of Chimba, Yavay. Chazanga. Or the Indusane, Shirp the Shiv Kasham Sundua. Benjamin Corley, should be part of Chimbas, Shijin and Shadi, the name. Answer.
In the case of, we were talking about the importance of determination, but at the same time, aspiration and determinations in itself cannot bring about the profound transformation we are seeking for. So, for example, at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, which was chanted, the Heart Sutra opens with a dialogue between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara while the Buddha Shakyamuni remain in the meditative state. And so in the opening of the dialogue between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, a question is raised. For a bodhisattva who wished to engage in the practices of the perfection of wisdom, how shall he or she go about doing it? And then the text opens with a saying that, with a statement that the bodhisattva who wishes to engage in the practices of the perfection of wisdom must proceed in the following manner. He or she must view all the five aggregates, the physical and the mental aggregates, to be devoid of inherent existence. So right there, at the beginning, at the very opening of the text itself, there is a reference to the need for cultivation of wisdom of emptiness. So the point being made here is that although determination and based upon aspiration is very important to motivate one towards the practices, but it is the determination and aspiration complemented with the faculty of wisdom that is going to make the big difference. So between the two primary modalities of an approach on the path, one approaching more in the form of aspiration and determination, one through the application of intelligence, between these two, it's the application of the faculty of intelligence that is more important. So when we speak about wisdom here, generally in the text there are mentions of wisdom pertaining to conventional level of truth or phenomena and wisdom pertaining to the ultimate level of truth or phenomena. Between these two, it is the wisdom related to the understanding of the ultimate truth that is primary. And so when we speak about perfection of wisdom, for example, even the very title of the text is referred to as perfection of wisdom. So here we are talking about not just any wisdom, but a wisdom realizing emptiness, and that also at the level of a perfection. So when we speak of perfection of wisdom, we are talking about a realization of emptiness, which is reinforced and complemented with the faculty or factor of awakening mind, bodhicitta. So the direct realization of the wisdom that directly realizes emptiness, and that is complemented with the factor of bodhicitta, that is referred to as the perfection of wisdom. So when we look at the etymology of the term perfection of wisdom, prajna paramita or paramita, paramita means to go beyond. So in the etymology, one can understand this in terms of the actual process, that which goes beyond, or that which to which one has gone beyond. So if you understand perfection in terms of the actual process, then the wisdom directly realizing emptiness that is present in the Bodhisattva's mental continuum, that can be understood as a perfection of wisdom. So the main point is that all of this emphasizes the role of wisdom, particularly in the Sanskrit tradition.
Yeah.
So, for example, just now we had the recitation of Heart Sutra, and towards the end of Heart Sutra, there is a mantra, a string of mantra, which begins in the following, which reads in the following: Tatyatha gade gade paragade parasamgade. So, Tatyatha means it is thus, gone beyond. So, this explains the process of going beyond.
Yeah.
So, of course, the major explanations will come later.
So, there's the basic sort of structure of Buddha Dharma. Now,
No.
도 나바시 송는 시체니 샤는 대세타디 랑게다 냠린 체니 텐저버 튼바샤 다지 레지 하네 차바베이네다 가서 그게 주도좀 좋다네 다 책이 있나 에노 냠바베 그누디 그누르리 냠바베만이 차진디 참 차바베만이 차진디 상에 녀셰 차바디 나도 켜요 그래스 아니 섬고요 태요 그래스 저송이 그래 다른 뜻이야.
So the next major outline of the text that we'll be reading from or addressing is having explained the greatness of the author and the teaching itself. The third outline is how to now proceed with the exposition, teaching and listening to the teaching itself, with what kind of attitudes and states of mind. And here, the main point being made is that the reason why we engage in the exposition and listening to the teachings is to really fulfill our aspiration to bring the realization of our immediate and long-term welfare. And in order to bring about that realization of that aspiration successfully, certain conditions needs to be met on the part of both listener and on the part of the teacher, so that whatever is taught and whatever is heard really serves their purpose of becoming as beneficial and as effective as possible. So on the part of the listener, certain conditions need to be created so that your state of mind and your attitude and your motivation for listening to the teachings remain pure, so that it makes you receptive to be beneficial, to benefit from the teachings. And on the part of the teacher also, it is important to make sure that as far as the motivation of the teacher in giving the teaching is concerned, it is unadulterated, it is pure, so that the motivation is to really bring benefit to the student and to the listener. And here, for example, the qualities that are very important are, for example, in the qualities that are listed for attracting students and gathering students, there are 4 qualities that are identified, and the last 2 are very important. These 2 are teaching appropriately and living those ideals that you teach, living through your own examples. So these are very important on the part of the teacher, so that whatever is taught really, and also as much as possible on the part of the teacher, it is important to have the skills to adapt the teachings according to the level and the need and specific circumstances of the listener, so that whatever is presented is most effective in bringing about the necessary transformation that one is seeking. So once these conditions are created, then when you engage in the participating in the listening to a teaching or giving a teaching, then the activity will become beneficial. So these are the points Tsongkhapa is making under this outline.
Yeah. So
the 4th major outline is how to lead the students with the actual instructions. So in this context, when we talk about instructions, we are talking about the instructions of the Buddha Shakyamuni.
Umar Jitanalia and Kurima Sundante Nialo Montu Chedi Son Migichuda, Tenet Lossobon, South the Chigi, Kanda Chudunis, I will tell him though, Jenny, Kanda Montu to Son. Then should they nearly to Son. 진짜 그림 도시 소리 말이야. 아니 내릴 쪽에 수수도 그도 돼 돈이 다 쓰는 거야. 리지트가 티다지. 다디 개볼로 담바 숨도와. 개볼로 담바 진짜네. 강사 치라고 지기. 뭐래야? 막 티다 송송아. 다 고불루기 청주 섬지나. 청주 섬지디 선두 저기가 다 책, 뭐부터 저 당장 해서 책뒤 전에 다 책뒤 드시게 말이. 다 뭐부터 저 당장 풍부함도 계시도 송도 좀 남아. 철을 담으냐면 정수 선에 맞고 동원지로 신호스야기. 다 책뒤 안저가 제가 심으신 말이 좋습니다. 그래서 인구를 보다 상황들에다 책뒤 선두적 유가의 책뒤 그 책들이 저 오부신도 너무 지기다 말이야. 고송셔 처리야. 자, 드레이메 이런 전에 뭐부터 저 당로 공부하고 지도 시서게 책뒤 그림을 하나만 단단히 내가 다음으로 따왔지. 동링해서 저주선도 나. 당당 전주 선비 내가서 아니 구조 전주 선비 휴대 아니 송체 다 된대기 동반이기 따와디 치지 말라고 다 과자 삼배탄에 예만이 권배탄에 즉 초야 그러실래베 이나 아니 동네에서야지 가서 그게 타진이 것이 동네 둘을 다 그게 동네 주 댄진을 아니 가서 그게 늦지도 손대내기 다시 로치 용야 여다 로치 기야 여되지 통리 루산에 아니 동네 세우인 거지 그 통인 거다 동네 둘을 뭐 동대여 시 루산에 동네 주 대기에 저 동네 타진이 거지 통인 거다 대인지기야지 레고도 저들이 루산에 정주선들 나리야 동리가 따고 받은 게 할수 대슈때 아니 단 대세견이다. 대세견이잖아요. 어슈때 장주 가사 들으려 동리가 따와 과야 차 동리 따와 공네 그게 영어도 중요해는 돌아 차고 태소매 sen다 닝지기야도 태소매 세송도가 다들 원문도 원시 다들 루산에 따에 따는 거야 되냐서 대내 대시를 대지를 시를 좋아져에 아니 특기남이디 송고야래 자 지단 또 뭐라고 봐 다디 치자의 개발 가사죠 년근 수록 당해 송당 저리야 아니 강사 거제가 온다 제가 때문에 지생을 얻으셔. 티장들 니송도와 강사 거장 얻으신 칠루직. 때문에 지생을 얻으신 칠루직. 자, 한다면 루루랑 그다 송배는 디니부도 스텝이나. 우머리 지천에 지단디 강사 거장 얻으셔. 장주 섬지를 지단디 때문에 지생 얻으셔 가시죠. 지를 안 되게 담바. 안다 그 담바는 있어. 담바티 좀 되게 담바마다. 좀 되게 담바티特度年龄 탐지지고 그만 좀 해야 다 맞아요. 그래서 어떤 네 자와 싫어고 좋아할 때네 근데 타봤어야지 얘가 지상을 과도야. 탐지지도 고마워야지 얘가 지상을 과도지. 내가 좀 될 때네 얘는 타봤더니 물로 깨고야지. 또
So with regard to the procedure by which students are led on the basis of the instructions, there can be different approaches. For example, even in Nagarjuna's own writing, we see a divergence of approaches. For example, in his Precious Garland, the main procedure that is adopted is first by presenting all the teachings that are related to the realization of attainment of a fortunate rebirth. Higher rebirth in a fortunate realm. And so within that context, the teachings on the morality of adopting abstaining from 10 negative actions, and also how to maintain a way of life that is free from falling prey to various forms of wrong livelihood. All of these are explained within the context of a practitioner who aspires to attain a favorable rebirth in a higher realm in the next life. And then having explained that part of the practices, then in the second part of in the latter part of the text, Ratnavali, Precious Garland, Nagarjuna then goes on to explain all the practices that are related to the attainment of liberation, nirvana, and the definite goodness. And here, in this context, the presentation of the view of emptiness is explained, the correct view of emptiness is explained. So now this approach, since Ratnavali, the Precious Garland, is explicitly written as a letter of an instruction, a letter of advice to a king, so the approach being presented in that is very specific to a particular individual. Whereas if you compare that to Nagarjuna's own text, commentary on the awakening mind, Bodhicitta Vivarana, then the approach is very different. In the commentary on the awakening mind, which is in fact the entire text is an exposition of a verse from a stanza from Root Tantra of Guhya Samaja, where it explains how all phenomena are devoid of intrinsic existence and also devoid of the duality of subject and object, and explains the equanimity within the, in terms of the absence of inherent existence of all phenomena. So that passage from Guhya Samaja Root Tantra forms the basis for the exposition of this particular text by Nagarjuna, which is a commentary on the awakening mind. And in this text, since it is a commentary on exposition of this particular stanza from Guhya Samaja Tantra, clearly the audience that is being targeted in this text are really practitioners of advanced capacity, because they are practitioners of highest yoga tantra, therefore trainees of highest yoga tantra. Therefore the procedure of the path presented there is very different. So in fact, in this text, Nagarjuna immediately begins with the explanation of emptiness. So there the practices that are related to cultivating the correct view of emptiness is presented first. So on the basis of studying the teachings on emptiness, when one develops a deep understanding, and on that basis, when one reflects critically upon one's understanding, then on that basis, one will develop a deep ascertainment of the meaning of emptiness, which when through meditative practices becomes internalized, then the individual practitioner will even arrive at a point where there will be a certain experiential flavor to the person's understanding of emptiness. And once you have that kind of understanding of emptiness, then you begin to recognize that the possibility of an end to suffering, because you recognize suffering arising from ignorance, which is a distorted state of mind, and you come to recognize that this distorted state of mind has antidote, powerful antidote that directly negates the content of that, perspective of that ignorance. And by seeing that the root of suffering, there is a powerful antidote that can eliminate it, you begin to recognize the possibility of an end to suffering. And so once you recognize the possibility of an end to suffering, then this realization of the possibility of an end to suffering can in fact generate within you a powerful feeling of compassion for all beings. So therefore Nagarjuna in fact writes in the Bodhicitta Vivarana, Awakening Mind, where having explained the meaning of emptiness, at one point he says, in the person in whom the realization of emptiness has arisen, there is no doubt that attachment for all beings will arise. Now here, attachment refers to compassion. So what we find in Bodhicitta Vivarana is a procedure where the practitioner begins with cultivating the understanding of emptiness and thereby cultivating the ultimate awakening mind, and then on the basis of that ultimate awakening mind, one cultivates the conventional awakening mind, which is the bodhicitta, and proceeds in that manner. So these two approaches are very different. So so if you look at these two approaches, and then it makes sense, for example, kind of a latter-day Tibetan master, Nyenjun Sungrab, developed a phrase where he talks about certain approaches of a teaching which is specific to an individual, and certain approaches of teaching which are taking into account the overall structure of the path. So, you can see that this kind of understanding really applies to the two quite different approaches found in Nagarjuna's teaching, one in the Precious Garland and the other in the Awakening Commentary on the Awakening Mind. So in short, when Tsongkhapa talks about how to guide the student on the basis of instructions, here instructions refer to the Buddha's instruction, and the Buddha's instruction, the purpose of the Buddha's instruction is bring about the attainment of definite goodness, which is the liberation and the Buddhahood. And there, the principal factor is really the cultivation of wisdom, as explained before.
Yeah. Today, the almost given earlier, Sanji Jumden Degi, Che, Motor, Chedan, Ata Motor, Chedan Di, any that did it. That's Sanji Che Nala, Daniela, the Mondo to be tap the take us over. To dig Dinjungane, the Song Guyari, that did landed, let them debut Namshat Lake Guyari. The Zutan Nala, Shingo Chemokutua. Tagana Shingi Salangi, the London debut Namsha Sun Duzane, Rikchi, Adangarandola, Peshin to Kujuri, Shingori. So that deity under that, Mabet 100 Pejirba. So that the Zutaria, Peggy Nevaniachi, conditions them now. Sanye Gisung Goku, Kanshi Tesum Genjo, Day Dongba Ni Dendi, Dinikona Ichisha, Somboa. Tagadanshigi, any Pechitaway, Zoyot on the military challenges Spaway. Chenodas, the Sundea, question couldn't direction. That day, soon they Dapa Chi want to change. Now should say David Luzane. Nehan Tower of Jiba go back to me. That they don't need direct in the Triadema, the Chamadua. Kadam got into Dabashi soon to Sane, got into Tuwa. Got in Saji, Dume, Chave, and got in Saji, took you ever in. And Dume going to Gabadua. Dume Bang Tawaji, Toya Mana, Dume going to Shoskim do usually. My Kiwur is dead the Yagrimato, to make you some down Danny, so long parallel Shoskim do. Raya, to me say you ever Tona, what to make some down, to make you the Zachani, and to make Daniel, chilling in the Zorgin, Drugina, Cordua, Jimzadua. She didn't any, just him to us. I did design because I couldn't you much of it, Dambani, Junji would the Sunday, the Sung Yari. This Suyagi, Shazamation, should the Baba Kayaslam. She should the Giru, don't haste the conversation, just him to her. Casa, she said that this year. Casa. Because I'm so sure she has to go to Casa. Many number of the Miwa number pasta. She can't have a Tamishita Sundua. Many number of the Miwa number paras. Temples also like the Lamas in the John Shas Sundea. That he did Midama Sung, you are doing about the Sumia, do is that Sundua. That's it. 애니 좀 되게 전화디 송롱 파야서 또 다 과학대에서 아주 여러 있나? 다 뒤도 봐도 동네를 상제가 소 대화래야 동네는 시임은 두지기 동네는 시임은 태 랑자 탑절을 지체 애니 대를 셴배 왕기 다른 거 레사이고요. 그래서 근데 이제잖아요. 다들 너무래스 동네이보다 수익신 그래도 교회 동네이보다 두지기 동네이보다 좀 되게 모자나 애니 동네 쉐버를 차서 송대하기 데려와 그래서 대송이하기 뽑았디 동네도 쉐베 타네 조 두지기 동네도 쉐베 타네 두지기 동네에서 랭귀지 상황자리 한기 상황도 드러세 묘모세한테 가리면 쉐베지다 대 진짜로 올라인 것이 다 쉐베지 좋아이나 달은 못 담는 게 되겠지 대선 그런 신도 슈메가 근데 처음에 그런 신도 슈메가 근데 지금 상황 거래 타네 애니 꼭대 세아지가 여정하지 대 중에 저 되니 되기로 사다디 나머산지를 쳐 자다 되르샤 된다면은 애니 에너지 신이 된 줄지 구루요가 신이 된 줄지 다음에 시기는 다 단저하다 지원이라고 하듯이 지금도 동네 삼야 아니 라랑 변에 잠조 집에이나 라랑 잠조 대던데 라랑 잠조던데 아니 그나 럽질럽이 하시는 일이 무디거리 투모로 무디벌이 용거로다 대지대도 무디거 중에 여가서도 마셔서 들켜서 전문에 뒤가 나도 주기 상황으로 집어내도 다이네 변에 소주봉 침을 시행의 소주봉 지구로 봐 쉬게 좀 하는 거다 다가는 신기하게 라 소잖아 아니 라랑 게 있니 담배 공부도 개조래 신 두신 소주봉 용으로 보다 또 머질리 봉야 로인 봉야 지금 참 치수가게 봉야 아니 납심 너심 자 출로 상으로 같이 투모래 납심 너심 경이면 출로 상으로 해야 돼요 다 로더 써야 돼 로더 좀 먹고도 가 아다 때는 납심 너심 시대야 돼 차단 몽숨 써야 될 미자와 기부 증거들이 있는 차단 몽숨 저거보다 안 돼도 기부 주문 셔베 그들이야 차가 난게 치라고 납심 셰단 난게 치라고 너세 되자고 진짜 다 네거도 록다디 그다네 저 가서 그게 변호 소주가 제샤나 그런 게 야말에 상대 전대하게 급지 급도 록다지 자야도가 인지미지 대시도 저기 되게 내가 록다야 냠 동생 수도 셰줄에 마도 진짜 록다 배지도 자주 오면서 이 자리에 있는 실로 사원하나 도가 다 캐버런디 상계의 취업이 캐버런 다 가르쳐는 저거서나 탈배 남샤지 땅을 보네 탈배 대양 신금적 덕신기 신금 소식을 배치 샘딩기 주머 세배 다 차차 지당시에는 샘딩기 주머 방배다 차차 들리지도 다 탈바샤 너는 생각 된게 연대지 그래서 다들 인도선에 다 내가 따와 실시하게 타라 아니 대탄에 다 가지고 그게 다돈 짐배 주먹방배 아니 제외 연대지고 탈바 샤야 다디 다 상제베셔라 차. 다 제전제네 아니 단조든지 예간에 송지금 미다고 고양 내두는 거 와서 뒤리 대전제 상 담배는 나베지 샤용도.
So with respect to these two diverse approaches of presenting the Dharma, one with relation to a specific individual's need and context, one from the point of view of the overall presentation of the Buddha Dharma. Here, for example, in 400 stanzas by Aryadeva, again Aryadeva talks about these two different primary purposes of the Buddha's teachings, one aimed at realization of an immediate aspiration, which is the attainment of a favorable rebirth. The other one is the attainment of definite goodness or liberation. And here, if you look at the teachings that are related to, and the practices that are related to the attainment of a favorable rebirth, then we are primarily talking about understanding the law of causality and the teaching on dependent origination in terms of karma, law of causality. And there, the primary form of causality, law of causality that we are trying to understand is really karma. And however, when it comes to the presentation of karma and the karmic laws, there are many aspects, facets of the karmic law that remain totally obscure to us. And similarly, if you look at the various presentations of the subtleties or various aspects of the various levels of realization of the paths, at this point, many of these very subtle aspects of the various levels of the path will remain obscure to us. So in these cases, the way in which we cultivate kind of conviction in these aspects of cause and effect initially will primarily take the form of having some kind of admiration and having some kind of conviction based upon that admiration. However, Aryadeva points out that so in terms of cultivating a conviction in those aspects of the Buddha's teaching, the most skillful way of doing this is to first understand the Buddha's teaching on emptiness, Buddha's teaching on no self. And then, so he says that with relation to the Buddha's teaching that relate to very obscure facts, one can approach them and cultivate conviction in them on the basis of having a deep conviction in the Buddha's teaching on emptiness. Similarly, Dharmakirti says in his Pramanavartika commentary, exposition of the valid cognition, there he says that because the Buddha has, the teacher has proven to be faultless or reliable with respect to the teachings on the principal teachings, particularly the Four Noble Truths, no self and emptiness. Therefore, one can extend the same level of conviction and confidence in other teachings that the Buddha has given. So what we see here is that when it comes to the presentation of the Buddhist path from an overall point of view, the principal approach is to really proceed with cultivating a deeper understanding of the principal teachings of the Buddha, which relate to the Four Noble Truths and which relate to the teachings on no self and emptiness. And so even in the context of the Four Noble Truths, the key point is to really develop a deeper understanding of the third Noble Truth, which is the truth of cessation, and to recognize and appreciate the possibility of the attainment of cessation. Otherwise, if we look at the teachings on suffering and its origin, and then if there is no possibility of an end to suffering, then there is simply no point in reflecting, contemplating deeply upon the nature of suffering, because if there is no possibility of an end to suffering, and there's no possibility of attainment of cessation of suffering, then any deeper contemplation on suffering and its origin will result in depression. And clearly, Buddha was not interested purely in making his followers depressed by, delving ever more into the nature of suffering. So, for example, when we look at the nature of suffering, we are talking about evident suffering that we can all identify. Also, we are talking about the suffering of change, which we conventionally identify as pleasurable experiences. Then there is the third level of suffering, which is the suffering of conditioning. So, as one contemplates deeply upon the nature of suffering and comes to recognize that particularly the suffering of conditioning, which is the most profound level of suffering, arises on the basis of karma and afflictions, and which are all rooted in the fundamental ignorance and grasping at some form of enduring self. And then once one recognizes the distorted nature of that grasping, then one will appreciate the possibility of cultivating a perspective that directly opposes that. And through understanding this, one will recognize there is at least a possibility of an end, bringing an end to that suffering. And once you recognize that, then there is a real meaning and purpose to contemplating on the suffering. So that's why the reason why Buddha was so, there is a sort of a degree of confidence behind Buddha's teaching on the suffering and its origin, because the confidence is stemming from the fact that he knows there is the truth of cessation. And so when we understand the Buddha's teaching, we need to relate all of the teachings to the principal teaching on emptiness, and the purpose of that is to attainment of liberation. Because otherwise, if we confine our understanding of the Buddha Dharma specifically to individual practices alone, say for example like Guru Yoga, or proper reliance on a spiritual teacher, or cultivation of the awareness of death and impermanence, or taking refuge in the three jewels, or and living one's life according to following the precepts of taking refuge. Taking refuge in one's own object of refuge, and following the precepts based upon that, going for refuge, and also all of these teachings, practices, and teachings can be found in non-Buddhist teachings as well, and not only in the classical, historical non-Buddhist teachings, but even in all the contemporary non-Buddhist spiritual traditions, you can find a version of all of these, a version of taking refuge, a version of living one's life according to the precepts, stepping out of that taking refuge, recognition of the importance of awareness of death. All of these can be found in the non-Buddhist traditions as well. And similarly, for example, when we look at the practice of morality, say for example, abstaining from killing, the act of abstaining from killing need not be by itself a Buddhist practice. One can be totally non-religious and out of fear of legal consequences abstain from killing, and that is the act, but that is not a spiritual religious practice. Similarly, a non-Buddhist practitioner can adopt the morality of abstaining from killing with the belief that doing so would violate, God's wishes. So again, so you can see that, by themselves, these individual practices, so long as you don't tie them to the ultimate aim of the Buddhist path and the point of the Buddhist teachings, they are not specifically Buddhist practices. They are common practices that are found in all the other traditions. And for example, within the 10, morality of abstaining from the 10 negative actions, we have 3 mental, covetousness, abstaining from covetousness, ill will or harmful intent, and wrong view. So we can see that, this is at the level of the practices relevant to the person of initial capacity. So there, attachment and aversion and ignorance are not listed, but a very specific forms of these 3 poisons are listed. Instead of the general attachment, a more specific form, covetousness, is listed. Instead of aversion in its general category, more specific form, harmful intention, is listed. And also with wrong view, at the level of the initial capacities practice, the wrong view need not necessarily be understood in terms of a kind of law of karma and so on, but rather the wrong view can be understood in terms of a person who defies the morality and engages in, say for example, taking life, thinking that there is going to be no moral consequences for this. So that kind of a view is a wrong view. So you can see all of these practices can be in themselves, not necessarily specifically Buddhists. So, however, what distinguishes a particular practice, spiritual practice as Buddhist is when it is tied to the overall motivation and purpose of attainment of liberation, and which is based upon recognition of the possibility of an end to suffering and its origin, which is based upon the recognition of the possibility of the truth of cessation, and where all of these practices are complemented with the understanding of the Buddha's teaching on no self and emptiness, then these become Buddhist practices. And even in the case of liberation, one needs to understand that the way in which Buddhism defines moksha or nirvana is not really transcending into some form of physical plane that is heavenly realm, but rather moksha or liberation is defined in terms of a quality or a state of mind where the individual practitioner has reached a state where the person has purified his or her mind from the stains of grasping at inherent existence or true existence. And therefore, the point is that the teaching on no self and cultivation of the view of no self really becomes central to defining any spiritual practice as being Buddhist. And that is, so the teaching on no self and the cultivation of the view of no self is what defines a spiritual practice as a Buddhist.
Yeah. That gives you a lot.
So we will now move on the next section, which is the section stages of the path for persons of middle capacity. So we're actually not going to go straight there, but the point we want to refer to this is to really introduce what is meant by the actual instruction. And the actual instruction is the instruction of the Buddha, and the heart of that is to provide instruction that relates to the attainment of the liberation.
That is given to the Tumu, Lam Rim Chenmo, she, Sambachang, subject march. Missouri. You know, you drink Sambachang, and Goddess Sulu, the Pasha, and the Daniel, I give you the show and I'm going to quiet soon. The subject among changes on it. Tabatoni, you long mercy what I'm says, that's right. That's right. This one. Other tissue day. Tarba Shevan and Jimbali draw days. Ten let a pneumonia call Chingy in la. Sentati. That is something. Color Nyalembe, Pumbu, Nings of Jawani, Jingbe Mo, Yimbe, Teletron, Tarbos. This one. Tabashavan, Jimbo, draw this set. That is any generation, any Congress comes from Sati, the watch, the Shuda, Tedevita, and the Casoli, Nyal, Pumbula, Ningsum Chow, and Jimbo, Yimbe, Teletron, Tabos, Tetober Durban, Tabaton, Laws. This one. That is 다른 기본적인 지시를 비치만 손 뒤슈데 당고시만 샤이잖아요. 타바트니 롱머송
So in this section, in the opening part of the Lam Rim Chenmo section dealing with the practices related to the person of middle capacity, Tsongkhapa writes what is meant by liberation. So he writes, liberation means freedom from bondage, and that binds you to cyclic existences, karma, and afflictions. And then says that since this is the nature of bondage, freedom from rebirth impelled by karma and the afflictions is liberation. And the desire to obtain that freedom is the mind intent on liberation.
Tadianda Gobuluduki, Jiranda Mudigba, Mudigbe, Shunalore, Tarbe Moksha, Sahabi, Tarbe Namshash, Kasuri. That's Yere. The Sanjebe, Damebe Tawa, Chisheni, that they want to share Taba, condition was the way in. The Jidan Benda, Kasuri, Terry and dance in the Sungiva. That the ship Hogan, that they were precise, sometimes in Gobuludugi, and the Ladan you more seven tar, Ladan you more Namdole, Tata Trelani, Tonga Ni Ki Gabaju Sinis Jetaja. It is a name, Tonga Niti, Tabatuji. That Leja Ganalolia, Tonga Nitu Gabaju Sachi. 6 Sata, Chima, Kandu Savage, Chimichi Insu Tava, Chimichi Insu Savage. Sata Taramomati, Tabasa, Modo sending Chini, Kandu, Chini Tellum, Muribe Wangi, Chini Tellum, Momba Wangi, any Chundeva deity, the Chudi in the Mombe, Muribati, Taguzane, Tewang Chuni, Yundi, Chudi in the Taru, sending Chini Taru. Says our Taran sending Chini.
So generally speaking, if you look at the various classical Indian spiritual traditions, the notion of moksha or liberation is common to the classical Indian traditions. However, in the Buddhist context, the moksha or liberation is defined generally as a state of mind or quality of mind, and particularly in the form of a freedom from some pollutants. And to be more precise, Nagarjuna explains this very clearly. And of course, in the Buddhist context, the very understanding of moksha or liberation is tied intimately to the view of no self. And Nagarjuna gives a much more precise explanation of this in his Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, where he says that through the cessation of karma and afflictions, one gains freedom. And karma and afflictions come about from false conceptualizations, and the conceptualization are calmed by means of emptiness. So here, in this, on this reading of Nagarjuna's text, emptiness is explained as a method by which the cessation of afflictions and karma is brought about. However, there is also an alternative reading of the Sanskrit text where one reads the last line in a locative sense, not an instrumental, where then we read the false conceptualizations are calmed within emptiness. And this reading suggests that because unenlightened existence or samsaric existence arises on the basis of our ignorance and distorted understanding of the nature of mind itself. Therefore, it is by cultivating insight into the nature of mind where through this wisdom all the pollutants and the distortions are literally kind of calmed and kind of dissolved, comes to be dissolved within the nature of mind itself. Therefore, the nature of mind at that point when all the conceptualizations, false conceptualizations have been dissolved and calmed, that state, that quality of the mind is understood by Nagarjuna as liberation, what is meant by liberation in the Buddhist context.
This one, 사다한테 탈바 사야지 찍벌을 줘레스 징지도 가르치는 내년이 그래서 강도 찍벌에서는 내년지 샤완전기 다 풍부 겨와 다 풍부 겨와들이다 가서래 다 풍부 겨와서 풍부도 징신해 질 풍부 장시가 말해 안더디 녀얼레베 풍부선에 자고야 돼 풍부를 녀얼레베 마잉에 사미 풍부 부르다 안더디 녀얼레베 사야데 대 내년의 장 다 대왕 좀 돼봐 대샹왕제 진짜가 풍부지라 녀얼레베 풍부스 사더디 녀얼레베 풍부 풍부겨와 뒤미쳐도 그게 가서 우리 라면을 tel려야 가서 그게 감시를 쓰는 민도 다 tel려 찍셔지 자 드네 일주안에 다 랭인지 샤완쟁의 풍부 쿠르 치시가 되시도 다 풍부 쿠르 치고라 말이다 간다 냐월레베 풍부 다 쿠르들 여바텔라 다 가서 우리 동영코와쟁 풍부 쓰다지 동네 코와쟁 풍부 쓰는 내니 풍부 대코와르샤 대대기다 풍부균 가서 우리 그게 증리 규제하잖아 코와 소리 다 코에 기준 된데도 영야디 내년이 왕기 우여가 있잖아요 내년이 칭지에 나왔어 자 따디 디슈데가 따디 슈데 따디 디슈야 독진 코에 님이 사바도 꾸주 코에 주를 사바 탕불니 독진 대시 토물 수고 공부되면도 동네 공부 응어서 독진 대시 토물 수고 공부되봐 써야 돼 디샹다 도서 다 될래야 군중이 교당 독진이 대인되고 임에 군중만라 독진 치워 이나 지시 좀 된데 이 전제를 뭐 대답해 좀 결론도 되는 거 보다 보는 거 보다 뭐 시송 샤나스 텔라 땜베 윤지지를 벌려 도대 숨벌라는 냠내기 내심 뭐 예배 계속 태양 강샤는 디자 다들 디샤
So we read here in Lam Rim Chenmo when Tsongkhapa explains what is meant by liberation or freedom. He says that liberation means freedom from bondage, and what binds you to the cyclic existence is karma and the afflictions. So he's identifying karma and afflictions are the things that bind us in the cycle of existence, and where the location where we are bound is identified as the cyclic existence. And so this is identified as a conditioned existence within aggregates that are appropriated. Appropriated aggregate is the term that is used. So it's not just any existence, because there can be existence with uncontaminated aggregates. But here, karmically conditioned aggregates, birth within the karmically conditioned aggregates is defined as being in samsara or being in a cyclic existence. And a continued existence from such aggregates to another aggregates is what is meant by cycle of existence. And within which, because it is karma and the afflictions that is binding us in this, there is an element of lack of control, lack of freedom on our part. And this kind of conditioned existence, continuous existence, is the cycle. And and then that's why Nagarjuna also says that suffering within cycle of existence is when one is bound within the existence of the aggregates. And
나가주는 말다. 그게 동호고제 봉사래. 쳐다.
Sorry. So this was Pramanavartika in Dharmakirti's text, where he identifies the aggregates as the cycle of as the samsara, and within which we undergo the experience of suffering. And then we move on to the next section when Tsongkhapa explains the process by which we continue to exist in samsara. He gives. So here he says, reflection on the truth of suffering is explained in terms of showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting that truth of suffering as the first of the Four Noble Truths and the actual meaning, meditation on suffering. And then the first here, Tsongkhapa writes that he first raises a qualm. The true origins are the causes and true sufferings are their effects. Why then did the Blessed One reverse that order if that origin precedes suffering and say, monks, this is the noble truth of suffering and this is the noble truth of the origin? Then Tsongkhapa responds, in this case, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect, not out of error. So, for example, in Maitriya's text, Ornament of Clear Realization, he explains the suffering and their origin in their actual sequence of order, because origins comes first and then the sufferings arise as their results and so on. But when Buddha first gave the sermon on the Four Noble Truths, he reversed that order and he began with the result, which is the suffering, and then moved on to the origin. So the question is being raised here, what is the significance of reversing the actual order and explaining the truth of the suffering first?
That's 동해 시부고 레스 동해 시부고나 데레탄도 있고 레스 다 디 동해서야디 도지기 동해 송겨래 봐. 다 남중 아주 규리야 도지기 동해도 완전히 야오살마 디 동해 통로도 와. 봐. 안도 풍불이야 아주 배제 로차니. 저때때 소소에 탕도 내야지. 리도 와. 엔 당의 식 사제가 좋았대와. 디디 아주 전문이 되가라. 아니 the digital say the size of the some of them be Miss Sanchez saw the old dealing of the image in Tado Jito. So the Tandoling over that. So that it is anything they do a share charge, a son share di. The other Bejolo Shagan of Sunding, maybe Tawasha. Quay just subject Maya Dumeki, Jing time to Chula years. Quay never Sandalas, Manguya, the Yine, Dunge to Tone, Teletandu to Dulayas. Saja saw Davale, Yinju Chirubala, cheese. Saja saw Davala, Dunge to Tone, Teletandu, Modibulayas. Modibata, the Changbet was at the chair. Some dead of Sumi, the Comia, the Zuchedi, the Saja saw Davala, Dunge dead. That dilettante Lord gay. That delicate tower you are, such as saw Davale, Yinju Chirubala, chi. That the Indu, Jumden de Dumesha Cha, so I get to make the Carson was Lavayana, Tan, Duji, Ranshingi, Nyar Lembe Pumbundi, Dume, Truth and Drube, Nan and Dad and Sumuda, Minecom, Chingolas. Nyar Lembe Pumbundi, any? 동해기 다 지금서 르미시마리 샴데다 디샴데 토용구리 동해 가서 그랬네 다들 동해 댄싱 너싱 마음발라 동해 영야기 두 애니 뉴모 패야다 지금 냉이 제순저 인도산에 그 뉴모 계획 초수도 되게 근데 집에 인도산에 다들 동해 추에 네 동해 주지기다 가서 틈비견으로 요리스 대단한데 애니 가소래 된제겠다 누지기 풍부 텔레야 말에 누지기 동해리야 애니 샤로게 텔레 탄도다 로 기고 그래서 대윤도 녀 가서 누지기 동해 시야데 도시 사디 랭유지 샤완쟁기 게다 네거텔라 다 루시도 메스 샤초요리 애니 대화 텐드도 샤완쟁기 내리 부모도 자초요리 텐드이메 인도 다 텔레 탐도로 깨이도잖아 묘모 방배 태연데 톤도 애니 테니즈레고도 예버는 좋아 생 오마서 들으셔.
So the significance of explaining the truth of suffering first is that the Buddha explains that only when one comes to understand the nature of suffering, then the true aspiration to seek freedom from that suffering will arises. Therefore, the truth of suffering was taught first. So when we are talking about the suffering in the context of the Four Noble Truths and the Buddha's admonition that we must recognize suffering as suffering, we are not talking about suffering in the conventional sense. For example, in a conventional sense, many experiences, for example, that are pleasurable and mundane successes, these actually we see them instead of as being in the nature of suffering, we see them as desirable. And in fact, for example, when we talk about happiness in the conventional sense, often we are talking about successes and excellences in a mundane context. In fact, and the reason why this is so is that, for example, when we examine our attitude towards people who are successful in worldly terms, we feel admiration and in some cases even envious, and which suggests that actually what they have is what we wish to have. So this shows that instead of recognizing these to be in the nature of suffering, we take them to be aspects of happiness. So the suffering that we need to cultivate understanding of is a deeper meaning, in a sense of a deeper meaning. And here, Panchen Lama, Panchen Lobsang Chogyен sums it up quite beautifully, which I often cite, where he says that and there are many ways in which one can contemplate the nature of suffering. And at one level, with relation to evident, obvious suffering, and this is a level of suffering which even the animals are capable of recognizing as undesirable and wanting to get away from these. And then the second level of suffering, which is the suffering of change, which are conventionally identified as pleasurable and happiness. With relation to that level of suffering, the non-Buddhist practitioners, those who seek heightened states of form and formless meditative states, and they are capable of cultivating a sense of disenchantment towards that level of pleasure and pleasurable sensations and avoid them. So in the context of the Buddha Dharma, when the Buddha talks about cultivating a true recognition of the meaning of suffering, it is the third level of suffering, which is the suffering of conditioning. So when we say suffering of conditioning, the conditioning here refers to conditioning by karma and afflictions. And here it refers to our very existence as being propelled and conditioned by karma and afflictions. And here, as Tsongkhapa explains in Lam Rim Chenmo, Panchen Lama also identifies that our existence bound within karmically conditioned aggregates are in a sense like the vessels container within which the fruits of our past karma and afflictions are ripened. And it also serves as a further condition that enhances the causes and conditions that would give rise to future sufferings. So our aggregates serve both as a container of suffering, present suffering, but also they serve as a condition for future suffering as well. And therefore, the one who is able to recognize suffering in that sense, one will then be able to generate a genuine aspiration to emerge definitely from that kind of conditioned existence. And this is what is meant by Ngenjung, or true renunciation, a definite emergence, an aspiration to definitely emerge from that kind of conditioned existence.
Day2 치더고시 이념도 군중그 담바 셰브르 셰베 대원도 군중그 담바 송소 니소와 다든가 대내 코여동에 사제에 내게 개바자 다 레레야 사제의 사면신이 물어봤다 라면 물어봤다 다 안듯이 사제에 돼 사고도 잡았을 때 유몽 왕기 개벨래 나 때내가 주니 나려야 아니 대코나니를 몸에 머리 받아 봐 코 편식 두지 레디 가서 그게 랑용내기 딱 그들이야 대코나니를 뭐 머리 받아 레를 뭐 머리 받았다 셔야 다 디스트와 서든든데 뉴무 왕기 개바스 사제기 레기 개바다 말해 이제 레장 뉴무기 개바탕스 드리기다 뉴무 왕기 중에 레디 사제 레제 레기 개바당 레장 뉴몽지 개바당 뉴몽지 자와 등진도 셰베 군중국 담바 셰베 계시 그래서 나디 쇼데 등진태양 돈을 통하나 나디 등진태 말하는 다 등진 행기도 차잖아 당연하게 용대 하지로다 그 준대 셰베 말로다 말이데 아주 로 행기버치리디 이네 다 로디 매버소트야 여더메 시다다디 다 조심하셔야지 다 될래야 다 로디 행기더 레디 이네 로디 치도 소원나시 털라 내여더메 다들 상당고요래 로컨시 치즈로 로인데 메시아디 로디 치도 소원나시 로디 진당 털은 내버지 로디 치도 소원은 털은 내버지 메이나 로디 신주와 로인버리 로디 치도 소원은 털은 내매나 로 행기래디 이네 딱고 치지로 로 차대야래 그래서 네임에 유산에 다 로컨시 치지로 인데 메시아디 로디 치도 그 진당 그르시다 다디 털은 내음이 상당들도 자, 이래이르잖아요. 머리봉은 좀발라. 머리에 시도 소원은 신기다. 그러지 싫어. 된디 뭐 내추럴 예버지래 예버 말해. 다들 상다리 말해. 자, 이래이르잖아요. 다 쳐는 이루 다 땅을 봐야 돼. 다 쳐는 이루 땅을 봐야 되잖아요. 능주장로 마셔 말. 아주 머리고 깨 있잖아요. 능주 때 실샤니 아타르즈 버기도 와. 능수 태냐 조시 능도 와. 해요. 쇼카다가 있네. 파 명대 샤성지 때는 미쳐. 태니 뭐는 여기서 샤리고도 와. 그래서 능수 디시도 와. 능수 디실 샤베터네. 대다도 댄사별로 기겨. 그래서 다 능수도 내수 미트버디 다 상당네. 다 능수 드리시는 것도 돼. 이내 지도 나왔다도 태는 내용이 다 상당. 제가 최고. 자다 나네 니부디 야와시 나네 니부디 야와시 체네 다 내수 지리인데 자 잡아줘야 돼. 자다 동료 주식을 어떻게 되겠다 내수 때를 봐요 그래. 자 드리면 이러잖아요. 다 가다 동네 녀모 세트야 여드면 세야지 녀모가 자와 댄진 세야 이바다 녀모가 자와 댄진 세야지 치지로 걸로 있는데 다 뒷단을 봐야 돼. 뒷단을 봐야 돼. 로트리 시도 소원은 시 대응업을 여드메 따뜻 상다들이 사실 이르잖아요. 다음에 주지 다 동이 다 남샤디 디가 내용도 와. 자다 네. 그래서 녀문지 자와 등진도 셰베 군중부 대바 셰베 계신 등진양 돈을 통하나 다 들려야 해지 김진이 천이 상당고도 처진에 담버즈임베 로티 Denzi Tangido, Lord Rangi on the Ajay, in a good dinner, Tane, Lotte, that send the Chichilo, let the Chiche. Denzing Tsambe, Numung Lot the Teddy, the new merenshi, Loy, new magic, that Nataro, Qualia, Numung Levache, Little Remedua, that chick some down. Belangaranzo Shetandro, Shukshabusta, you may be Kobe, Shushilia, Long to Nam, during the Shetaki, but Davidua. The savage. Maranzo Niri Naloria, Shetanda, Zendan, Gary, Lo, Chabalo Soba, Diatua. Cholujin Chabata ready, Ine, Charles of Chabati, Diatua. So Chabatia, you have a diggy. Le Renshi, Shetang more, do the Yana, Chabatishima. Charisma Shabata, Shetangi, Ujilamine, two Jigla, get to the Constantino. Such a lady Zane, the 100 Jula, Chabati is said, the Chora water rates, what Chunu, Chama water rate, you need to get to you have a diggy, Le Renshin, Zare, Sugar Cola, Shetangi, Chambai, the Chato. 대신도 덴지 시대에 로숙숨 스타일이 이네 다음에 뱉다와 땅을 상당나 낭서시마도 매 차우저리 산데 내가 숙치고야지 연구도 와 저거 로 현지를 그 네가 용토했어 저들이 전에 놓고 자외 쉐바 디 아니 세리 잠그 등이도 여대네 명장그 등이도 쉐바디 대중은 뭐 게임에 되고 세고 다들이 이만인도 다 좀지 니르하네 로컬에 생기는 실라 유목을 내가서 많이 돼 유목을 신도 매다 다가는 신기 유목치라고 르르다 자와 나 유목치라고 르르 써다 유목 자와 띠무 대진기 아니 지도 소원은 시 전에 내가 다 뒤도 상담이 섬야고 즉 소화실에 양용실에는 덴지세한테 매번 소소와 사무실 로리아 샤도 어디 되시죠 덴지 등진양 돈으로 통하나스 동행 각의 고봉도 차고 이점 차에 대오도 오버다 송소스
So we read from the text which is on page 269, last paragraph, where Tsongkhapa writes, next you develop an understanding of the truth of I think it was the penultimate paragraph. Once you recognize suffering, you see yourself as submerged in an ocean of suffering and realize that if you want to be liberated from suffering, you must counteract it. Moreover, you recognize that you cannot stop suffering unless you counteract its cause. By investigating the cause of suffering, you come to understand its true origin. Consequently, the Buddha spoke next about the truth of origin. And then he goes on to write, next you develop an understanding of the truth of the origin, an understanding that contaminated karma produces the suffering of cyclic existence, that afflictions produce karma, and that the conception of self is the root of the afflictions. When you see that you can eliminate the conception of self, you will vow to realize its cessation, which is also the cessation of suffering. So when we the conception of self or grasping at self that is being referred to here, Tsongkhapa is using it in a very broad, kind of general sense. Of course, when he explains it in a more specific way, later on it will be related to the teaching on emptiness. But here, he's presenting on a very general level where the consensus is among all the Buddhist schools is the recognition that grasping at self lies at the root of cyclic existence. So what Tsongkhapa is pointing out here is that once you recognize that suffering arises from its origin, and its origin is constituted principally by karma and the afflictions, And then you come to recognize that at the root of all the afflictions lies the grasping at self. And then it becomes very important that the question is this grasping at self, which is a very natural feeling that we all have. It is an innate mental state. It's not something that is acquired intellectually as a result of some kind of philosophical conditioning, but rather it is a natural state of mind that we all possess. It is an innate mental state. Then the question is, does the perspective of this innate mental state, the natural sense of grasping at the self that we possess, does the perspective of this is correct? Does it accord with the reality? This becomes an important question, because just because something is natural, a perception or a mental state is natural, does not necessarily mean that its perception accords with the reality. So the question is, we need to ask that question. And then furthermore, when you probe in this manner, you will come to recognize that this grasping at self is really a form of an ignorance, and therefore one needs to understand its distorted nature, and then the way in which we understand its distorted nature is to really again differentiate between our perception of reality and the reality itself. So some form of differentiation needs to be made between the way things appear to us, the way we perceive things, and the way things really are. And so generally when we react to events on the level of emotions with afflictions, we tend to react on the level of perceptions, on the level of appearances of things. And then because things appear to us as possessing some kind of independent reality of their own, we tend to immediately affirm that perception, affirm that discreteness and solidity, and we react to the events and to the objects on the basis of that confirmation of this perception. And then we tend to grasp very strongly at this solidity of the objects that we perceive. Therefore, however, by doing so, we are only relating to events on the level of perception. We are not relating to them at the level of their reality. So then the need arises as to compare whether there is a gap or a disparity between our perception and the actual reality. So therefore, we need to understand what the reality is. And this relates to the need to have some way of understanding the true mode of being, the actual mode of being of things. And this, of course, ties up to the Buddha's teaching on emptiness, because teaching on emptiness involves all the various reasoning that are presented in the text to establish emptiness are really all aimed at establishing a proper understanding of the actual nature of reality. So once we recognize this, then we will come to recognize that this naive perception of things as possessing self-existence really comes to be recognized as being distorted. And when we recognize that they are distorted, then we will come to recognize that they are unstable, and there is a possibility of rooting these out from our mental states. And so this is one important fact that one needs to recognize. The second important fact that one needs to recognize is that in themselves, the essential nature of mind is not really polluted. So for example, when we look at the afflictions such as anger or hatred, a person may be hateful kind of by temperament, but that does not mean this individual is going to be always in a state of hatefulness. The same individual may experience moments of loving kindness, moments of compassion, and loving kindness and hatred are diametrically opposed mental states, that two of them cannot coexist in a single individual at a single moment. So this shows that the fact that even the hateful person never remains hateful consciously all the time, and has occasional moments when loving kindness and compassion arises in this individual, shows that the essential nature of the mind itself is not kind of, inseparable from the afflictions such as hatred and so on. Similarly, in all of us, although our compassion and our loving kindness may be biased, but still natural emotions like loving kindness and compassion do arise in us. So this shows that in itself, the essential nature of mind has the ability or capacity to allow the arising of opposing mental states, whether it is afflictions or their opposites. Similarly, although our grasping at a true existence of self-existence of things may be very real and solid and natural, but that does not mean that somehow this is an integral part of the essential nature of mind itself, because by cultivating the wisdom of no self, we can gradually undermine the solidity of this grasping and eventually envision a point where one will be able to actually recognize the absence, opposite of the self-existence. So this shows that no matter how strong a particular state of mind may be, these afflictions are not an integral, inseparable aspect of the essential nature of mind. So therefore, these two premises become very important. One, that the afflictions, particularly their root, which is ignorance, is distorted. And secondly, that the essential nature of mind is, separable from these afflictions. On the basis of these two, one will then come to recognize that grasping at self-existence is a state of mind that is removable, that is a perspective that one can remove. And so once you recognize that have that kind of understanding, and then a genuine kind of a flavor, a feeling will arise in you when we're talking about cessation of suffering, and therefore a true aspiration will arise on that basis to gain that kind of freedom.
고블루루기 안다 돈이도 주변 나리야 교대 깨네 깨는 야다반에 떠봐가 되는 때에 머리 숨었어 다 머리 보면 진다 다 내루 저단리야 차라 민저 여배 인자네 머리 보 저단에 맨다면 된 차이거래 다 고블루루기 얘네 고버터도디 안다 샤티 교대 깨네 깨는 야다반에 떠봐가 되는 때에 머리 숨 달래야라 주니 좀 됐어 다 대공반 아니 아리안데 쉽게 나와야 르르르와 지신 뜸무고는 내게 돼서 지신이 뭐 탐정이랑 뜸무 좀 잡아줬어 다원은 뜸무 좀 야게 뜸무디 그러지도 먼저 거스라바이나 디 냠부 때문에 뭐네 돈이 뭐 가다 디 뜸무 뭐디 자 셰트야지 다디 냠부 줘도 가르송도 없으려나 댄지 대만 중앙아 통은 뜸무 중민 줄었어 댄지게 대권하니 통이나 뜸무 중고 말해实际上에 뜸무디 금디 뜸무 그러지도 먼저 거스라나 고루루 소샤베 교대 깬레 깨베 뭐보스도 댄중 그런 신기 뭐보디 아니 때는 따고 뭐인 봐 원이지 여봐 따대야디 다 머리고 뜸무는 먼저 버터 샤브시도 와 그래서 머리버디 뜸무디 매바 샤야디 댄진대가 중앙 통은 뜸무 중민교 대실 매바 끊이도 땅도 통하냐 말자 소샤다 들어도
So when we speak about ignorance, fundamental ignorance, depending upon one's understanding of a reality, how you define what constitutes fundamental ignorance is going to be different. So for example, in the case of Nagarjuna's own position, final position on this is found in the 70 stanzas on emptiness, where Nagarjuna writes that the phenomena that has arisen from causes and conditions, that which grasp at these as possessing final existence, that the Buddha has explained to be ignorance. So in other words, Nagarjuna is identifying ignorance to be that form of that mental state which grasps at a phenomena of dependently originated phenomena as possessing some kind of final reality of their own. And this is explained more clearly in Aryadeva's 400 stanzas on the middle way, where he says that just as the body faculty permeates all the other senses, sense faculties, in the same manner, delusion, which he is referring to ignorance, he says delusion permeates all afflictions. And then when he explains what is meant by delusion here, or ignorance here, then he explains this by way of presenting its antidote. And here he says that he who understands dependent origination, he who sees dependent origination, in him the ignorance will not arise. And therefore, with all one's efforts here, one should engage in the discourse on dependent origination. So by pointing out that the insight of the dependent origination is the direct opposite, direct antidote to ignorance, he is identifying the ignorance to be grasping at phenomena as possessing, being devoid of dependent origination. They are possessing some kind of final existence or final reality.
So that tension there was under the Gomulugi, Julie and I want to talk about comes. Chenita society that did Hazore. The dog shock, not the young double Mojubati, that Julia, Judy Danger the Goyua. To the Jenny Gemmanams, to the Jenny gave nobody, young double, Dogati, Marimaris. The Chinjlo Lores, Marie which the Swan, young double, Julia Maris, young double Mojubitum the Careslavna, to the Jenny Denny. To the Jenna Rada was. On a to the Jenna Rada, some she, and the regime of Kadus Lavna. That do the Mungu sometime watch. Dunjig, danger, Yimba Indusane, Dunjig danger, Rakwade, not some law. That Caso Catholic. Paget Tunduzoya, Dunjig danger, Rakwa was it Tunduzoy Paget Shadow Holiday. Dosan draw the me with the single of that. Raya, and you may send it to now, I sing to her. So that it is an avoid Dunje Rapachi condition with that. Tangaram meet Hajane, drove to do you with to Gudua. Raya. So then the Semelia, the Yiru Ozuma to Dalia, Sedula Chicta, Musaya the chick, Lojong chair, any Musaya to Dalia, the Lojong chair, Lojong because it's said, Professor Chavina, any point chatter, Castle Mumanga Raya, so any company Chamusi like Chavina, any Mumanga, those Dodigo. So the Yidi go, you dig it there some dandy. They would tell the tea, Yoyati. You tell the Changu do Sabatoni, that was a message at the water. You take a dollar on the tongue de door. That they do some stuff in. They would do the Doyati, Carson Terrorist. They would wrong to Yana, do you do more? So did he use an Jiri Shijala or Turney Yodabachi, Shijali, Yeva Indusane, they would do Devachi, who you would. That is Cesalia, but turn it to Yazi, young chocolate, Ramen and Megataji. The damn Ramen, Yana, turn it, do Gamadua. Do Gamana, don't enjoy one. So Salvador, said the limit is do sound Dabayina to do the Jew, say, danger, dangerous that they are all sometime. Turn it to the danger of the sound of Scotia. Turn it to the hour, some time in round meeting it. And never money, you are penetrating it. That day, Mingwang, and Mingwang, then it to them. 都是都是在理论上呢，좀 더 내게 존재의 된중 생각 송샤 되게 타가 동네 정보 송고야 말인데 얘네 다들 동네 정보 줘야게 맞아로 시절 때 송도 어디를
So when you look at Nagarjuna's stanza from the 70 verses, he actually cites the fact that phenomena come into being in dependence upon causes and conditions as the proof or reason for rejecting their possession of some kind of final existence. So, in other words, into the emptiness of phenomena is being established by means of taking the fact of their causal origination as a kind of a premise or a reasoning. Now, and this is an important point because what Nagarjuna is saying is that all phenomena are devoid of, all the causally arisen phenomena are devoid of inherent existence because they come into being in dependence upon their causes and conditions. And so generally speaking, the causal relationship is something that we are all kind of, naturally aware of. To some extent, at a very gross level, even the animals are capable of making causal connections. For example, they know that if they eat, they won't be hungry, and if they're feeling too hot, they will look for a shade. And so there is, even the animals are capable of making causal connections between events. And of course, in our case, we are more capable than the animals. So for example, that's why we think about our own future welfare. We try to save for our future, so that and in order to save more money, make more money, we try to better educate ourselves so that we have a better qualifications, so that we can get jobs like professorships and professorial positions with bigger paychecks. And also we may try to, if you're in the business, may try to join a more well-known company, a larger company, so that you have a bigger salaries and so on. And the idea here is that we make causal connections between certain things that we want in future and the conditions that are necessary to get there. And on the basis of that, we make all our efforts. So all of this shows that we do recognize in our day-to-day life the cause and effect relations and operate on the basis of that knowledge. But what Nagarjuna is pointing to is that, making us reflect more deeply upon the very fact of this cause and effect relationship. Why is it that the effects depend upon their causes? So we can raise the question, why is it that the effects depend upon their causes? This is because in reality, in nature, there is the phenomenon of dependence. There is a phenomenon of relationships. And what allows for this cause and effect relationship to function in the first place is that there is a certain openness. The cause and effects are not self-enclosed reality. So there is a certain openness that allows for this kind of relationship to occur. And because of this relationship, the possibility of this relationship, then events can relate to each other in a cause and effect manner. So once you recognize, therefore what Nagarjuna is pointing out is the possibility that by reflecting deeply upon cause and effect relationship, we can come to recognize the basic possibility of relatedness between events. And once you recognize that relational nature, and then on that basis, we can come to recognize all phenomena as being devoid of self-enclosed intrinsic reality of their own. And once you come to recognize that, then you will come to be able to understand how we can understand the reality and existence of things in terms of designation and conventional understanding. So, therefore, when Buddha taught the dependent origination in terms of causes and effects in the 12 links, although he is not explicitly teaching emptiness, but he is in fact providing the very foundation that serves as the basis for us to then understand emptiness.
Yeah. So today in the Gomulu to with this on it. Young church has some damina. You take Denjungi and the one to be a duty. Songdoa. Want to do this. Then the dog with Denjungi, nearly you did.
So, from another point of view, we can look at the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination at the level of cause and effect, and dependent origination in terms of emptiness. The first level of teaching pertains more to the cause and effects that are related to attainment of a favorable rebirth in future favorable rebirth in a higher realms of existence, and the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination in terms of emptiness pertains to cultivation of the causes and conditions that are relevant to the attainment of liberation. So that's one way of looking at these two sets of teachings.
Denjung that budget Denjung that Denjung Tara Somra, that Denjung Tara Niki Dene, and want to do that and get it to child. So the needles of the Gomulu to be any danger never joined the Gawa soon Zergi, some day soon as a
So what we recognize here is that whether it is the attainment of the realization of our temporary aim of attaining favorable rebirth, or whether it is the attainment of the realization of our long-term aim, which is the attainment of liberation. Both of these in both of these, the understanding of the teaching on dependent origination becomes relevant, and therefore Nagarjuna, I think this is in the 70 stanzas, says that and this teaching on dependent origination is the most precious among the treasury of the Buddha's teachings, Buddha's scriptures.
That didn't that the other Lam Rim Chenmo. 대다 탈방 고과 문도 저 냠도 즈바나 테른저가 람 강이 냠도 람게 땜벌어 주고 람된 탐으로 송소 다시 그러래.
So then Tsongkhapa writes in the text, this is on page 270, in this way, it's the third paragraph, in this way, when you think, I shall realize a cessation that is liberation, you become interested in the truth of the path.
다 될래야 아주 대부분도 제약이 그림 집에는 문동내를 줘 리터나 소나 신게 당분 먼저 줘 될 때는 내려 줘야지 내려 줘야지 처를 남지기 싫어 시부지 배주시고도 와 처를 남지기 싫어 배주시야 그냥 레바 양고 좀 주는 처를 남지기 싫어 배주시야 돼 저 리전에 리터나 소나 신게 당분 먼저 둬야지 신이 매벌 내고 중사 다 들으셔 자 드림이 있는 전에 다 뒤주야게 탑시 때 수남은 거 당분도 봐도 다는 더 버시 자다 뒤랭도 자 드림이 있는 전에 다 람림기 그림 도시 튀고야 토마 천디 나셔도야 되네야 전에 아니 치매 나셔도 되네 민중으로 듣니 아니 타버더니 타버줘야지 어디서 자 드림이 다 도시니 그러시라.
So in terms of actual
that the issue with washing the issue with the tedana and the gyulam long the chani the issue with the tedana tenshini tekwachi 중 군도 랜 도모를 숭신 코를 주고다 텔레 도베 내 탐제 야와르 셰베 뒤베 인베나 남주 주고 신도케 체신 냠린진 가동제 체베 르버 테다도 로마티 거데 세 야오도
So in terms of actual realization of the true aims, of course, the attainment of a favorable rebirth must precede, and then on that basis one can attain the realization of the second aim, the attainment of liberation. Because since the engagement on the path aimed at attainment of liberation requires the maximum use of our faculty of intelligence, and given that the human form, human existence is equipped with the most advanced form of faculties of intelligence, therefore, in order to engage in a path that is directed towards the attainment of liberation, one needs to have a form of existence that is equipped with those kind of qualities of intelligence. And therefore, in Precious Garland, all the practices that are aimed at attaining favorable rebirths are explained first, and then this is followed by the other teachings. And similarly, in 400 stanzas on the middle way, Aryadeva presents a sequence of practices where he says that at first one must avert all the demeritorious activities, and then in the middle one must cease grasping at self, and then finally one must cease grasping at all views, false views. And also in the Lam Rim teachings, the approach begins with first trying to deal with preoccupations that are totally confined to the concerns of this life. Once you have done that, then you move on to dealing with the preoccupations that are concerned with the immediate future life, and so on. And here Tsongkhapa writes in the text, this is on page 270, fifth para, this being the case, the Four Truths are taught repeatedly throughout the Mahayana and the lesser vehicle teachings. Since the Sugata has included in the Four Truths the vital points concerning the process of cyclic existence and its cessation, this teaching is crucial for achieving freedom. And since this synoptic outline of practice is important, it must be taught to students in just this order. So here Tsongkhapa is making a very important point, the need to guide students on the basis of the sequence of the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah. So
here in this big outline that we refer to, how the process by which the student should be led on the basis of the actual instructions. So all of this has been explanations is really trying to point out what is meant by the actual instructions.
So
given that this is what is meant by the actual instruction, then Tsongkhapa in the text says that when he explains this outline and the process by which the student should be led on the basis of the actual instructions, he explains first how to rely on a spiritual mentor, and on that basis of reliance, how to lead the student. And given that, on the basis of discussions, we understood what is exactly meant by the instruction here. Therefore, the spiritual mentor who is going to guide the students needs to have the qualities that are necessary to guide the students on the basis of such an instruction. Therefore, in this text, Tsongkhapa talks about the qualities that are important on the part of the teachers, qualities on the part of the student, and then how to then rely on the spiritual mentor on that basis.
Now break for lunch.
We're talking about the importance of determination, but at the same time, aspiration and determinations in itself cannot bring about the profound transformation we are seeking for. So, for example, at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, which was chanted, the Heart Sutra opens with a dialogue between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara while the Buddha Shakyamuni remain in the meditative state. And so in the opening of the dialogue between Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, a question is raised. For a Bodhisattva who wish to engage in the practices of the perfection of wisdom, how shall he or she go about doing it? And then the text opens with a saying that, with a statement that the Bodhisattva who wishes to engage in the practices of the perfection of wisdom must proceed in the following manner. He or she must view all the 5 aggregates, the physical and the mental aggregates, to be devoid of inherent existence. So right there, at the beginning, at the very opening of the text itself, there is a reference to the need for cultivation of wisdom of emptiness. So the point being made here is that although determination and based upon aspiration is very important to motivate one towards the practices, but it is the determination and aspiration complemented with the faculty of wisdom that is going to make the big difference. So between the 2 primary modalities of an approach on the path, one approaching more in the form of aspiration and determination, one through the application of intelligence, between these 2, it's the application of the faculty of intelligence that is more important. So when we speak about wisdom here, generally in the text there are mentions of wisdom pertaining to conventional level of truth of phenomena and wisdom pertaining to the ultimate level of truth of phenomena. Between these 2, it is the wisdom related to the understanding of the ultimate truth that is primary. And so when we speak about perfection of wisdom, for example, even the very title of the text is referred to as perfection of wisdom. So here we are talking about not just any wisdom, but a wisdom realizing emptiness, and that also at the level of a perfection. So when we speak of perfection of wisdom, we are talking about a realization of emptiness which is reinforced and complemented with the faculty or factor of awakening mind, bodhicitta. So the direct realization of the wisdom that directly realizes emptiness and that is complemented with the factor of bodhicitta, that is referred to as the perfection of wisdom. So when we look at the etymology of the term perfection of wisdom, prajna paramita or paramita, paramita means to go beyond. So in the etymology, one can understand this in terms of the actual process, that which goes beyond, or that which to which one has gone beyond. So if you understand perfection in terms of the actual process, then the wisdom directly realizing emptiness that is present in the Bodhisattva's mental continuum, that can be understood as a perfection of wisdom. So the main point is that all of this emphasizes the role of wisdom, particularly in the Sanskrit tradition.
Yeah. 자라 파르도 친사디 배지샴디 아더 실파르 치명아 순산에 대아타 디터데스 가데 파라가데 파라상가데 무디사 순산에 파르도 디시도.
So, for example, just now we had the recitation of Heart Sutra, and towards the end of Heart Sutra there is a mantra, a string of mantra, which begins in the following, which
So, Buddha Dharma, some scholar described Buddhism is not religion, but science of mind. I think it's quite true, because the Buddhism, like any other non-theistic religion, the basic concept is law of causality, cause and effect, all of that. So the thing which we are very much concerned, that is suffering, pain, and joyful or pleasant, very happy.
Happiness.
So the pains and pleasure, these things are feeling. So feeling means part of our mind. So the causes of that, of course, external factors are also there, but mainly within our own mind. So logically, in order to reduce suffering, pains, worry, sadness, fear, they ultimately depend on our mental attitude. So shaping new way our mind. Just a mere determination or mere wish, some extent is some effect, but that cannot sort of affect more profound way. So here, I think conviction, firm conviction, that is something important. Now, firm conviction must come out of analytical meditation. So therefore, the Buddhist way of approach is utilize human intelligence maximum way, through that way, transform our mind. So, now in Buddha Dharma, I think all Buddhist teaching based on Four Noble Truths. That in the Four Noble Truths shared there, the Tembashi shared there, Mindube, Dunegi Chok, Gunin Yomo Chok, Dudechi, Tandu Tewa, Namjang Chok, Dudechi, Song Yimbre. Karaslam the law of causality.
So when we speak of the Four Noble Truths, within the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, we recognize two sets of cause and effects. Yes. Attracting students and gathering students, there are four qualities that are identified, and the last two are very important. These two are teaching appropriately and living those ideals that you teach, living through your own examples. So these are very important on the part of the teacher, so that whatever is taught really, and also as much as possible on the part of the teacher, it is important to have the skills to adapt the teachings according to the level and the need and specific circumstances of the listener, so that whatever is presented is most effective in bringing about the necessary transformation that one is seeking. So on these, once these conditions are created, then when you engage in the participating in the listening to a teaching or giving a teaching, then the activity will become beneficial. So these are the points Tsongkhapa is making under this outline.
Yeah.
So the fourth major outline is how to lead the students with the actual instructions. So in this context, when we talk about instructions, we are talking about the instructions of the Buddha Shakyamuni.
다 딩이야 뒤질러보는 성게. 아도 고불로 주기 우마르지 태어나리야. 아니 구름마 송단데 냐로 모두 주게 최대 이송. 미기주다 되는 로소봉 소들지기 간다 최 주루는 이메가 야 어떻게도 전에 가다 모두 주게 터지지 있어. 되네 슈데 내리 주에 주대 있어. 진짜 그림도 쓰소이 말이야. 아니 내리 주에 쓰소도 그것도 돼 돈이 다 쓰는 거야. 다 이제 제가 나서 치다지. 다디 개불로 담바 숨도 와. 개불로 담바 치잖아요. 강사 치라고 지기. 뭐래야? 막 치다 송송아. 다 고불로 주기 청주 섬지나. 청주 섬지디 아, 선도 저기가 다 책 뭐부터 저 당장 해서 책지 전에 다 책지 드시게 말이 다 뭐부터 저 당장 풍부함도 계시도 송도 좀 남아 철을 담이냐면 정수 선에 맞이고 동원지로 신호서야기 다 책지 뒤 반자가 제가 shum신 말이 좋습니다. 그래서 인구를 다 상황들에다 책디 선두저 유가의 책디 그 책디죠. 저 오부신도 너무 지기다 말이야. 고송셔 쳐야 해. 자, 드레이면 이런 전에 뭐부터 저 당도 공부하는 지를 시서게 책디 그림을 하나만 단단히 내가 단어로 따왔지. 동링해서 저주선도 나. 단단 전주 선비 내가서 아니 구조 전주 선비 슈데 아니 송체 다 tenjegi tongpanyi ki tawa di chiji ma lopa da kwa cha da sanbe tane nyemanyi gombe tane chik chowa ya karo shi lebe yina eni dungen siya di 가서 우리 그게 타진인 것이 마고 노노노노 마마 말해 어쩌네
So when we speak of Four Noble Truths, essentially within the teachings of Four Noble Truths, we recognize two sets of cause and effects. One set that relates to the nature of suffering, that which we do not naturally desire, and also that suffering and its origin relates to one set that pertains to the afflicted class of phenomena or unenlightened existence. And a second set of cause and effects we find in the teachings on the Four Noble Truths relate to happiness, what we aspire for and what we wish to achieve. And that cause and effect category belongs to the class of enlightened phenomena or enlightened class.
Then, in Sanskrit tradition, the Shirvin Uttara, some then things in Yambashuni. And Yambashushimane, that's how you told Papa Janet and Shiribu. George Manche. No. Jenny, George Manche, and should be part of the symbol. She did the Bores, Joanna, and the Landia, and 리전도 뭐 따와 차대스 풍부가 뭐 다녀를 신이 도마로 양다고 just 따오 쟤네 따오 도시는 우초도 봐 쟤네 다시 진긴 너들 참에 나가 아니 실지 팔도 침버지 쪼송인 거야 실지 팔도 침버스 돼야 돼 그런 짓을었나 그 스코라 실업 자 도용도가 와다 철도 남지 실업지 쪼고처리 하래 듬방 직다 determination 즉 디기 도어야 루비할 때 이내 쪼데 철도 남지 실업 그 좋아도 제가 봐는 로고야지 근데 이면 이잖아요 실업지 쪼올림도 와 실지 팔도 침버스 자 다디나네 아다 금데 실업 순주자네 단담시의 실업 질군소도 실업이 하래 단담도 실업이 하래 디나네 다 안들때 단담도 실업이 다 쪼실이 하래 단담도 실업 대양 아니 실업이 바로도 침벌을 묘할라 아니 창조가 씀 있으면 좋고 하래 창조가 씀 있으면 아니 돈이 무슨 도도 실업 대라 실업이 바로도 침벌 세대기 하래 다 실업이 바로도 침벌해야 되라 늘 침벌든 디 침벌하잖아요 다 저들을 또 싸우면서 다 네가 디 침배 온도 샤베이나 와다 가서래 주주선배 규리야 실차서 하고 규리야 바로 침배도 이게 봐 말이야 자상가 어디는 인도산에 실업이 시부지 개정 소동도가 베제민 콜레 실업이 바로 침바 시진 셔야 돼 말이야 예 저거다
So, in the case of, we'll read in the following, Tatyatha gade gade paragade parasam gade. So, Tatyatha means it is thus, gone beyond. So, this explains the process of going beyond.
Yeah.
So, of course, the major explanations will come later.
So, there's the basic sort of structure of Buddha Dharma. Now, Chawanido de Bishulin Shidra Chawas. So, the Dalai one.
No.
That Chen Yambe to Shebe to Judu Tumu Shidra Chawas. That Chen Yambe Negolia. Takada. 去年现前的다 타바도 탐지 캠도 고마로 다 내가도 터도 너도 줘야다 내가도 터도 너도 줘야게 다 줄줘고야래 다 디메 이르잖아요 년세 그게 내가 켜고야래 근데 이메 이르잖아요 아니去年주 년바병원에 상담 그리스탄 고야메 개진 컨디지다 바 차고야 튕진 컨디지 차고야 디르소래 다가는 신기 두제 규를 그게 판바지 누가 터바지 영화가 차바베 문에 임바이나야 삼만남다 타네 아니 차지고 그래 다가는 신기 그게 만드셔야 되잖아요 그게 드셔 가지고 그게 칸번 나봐도 참듯이 드셔야 되고야 아니 조시시 도나버시 송은 신체에 시야는 드셔야 돼 랑게다 냠는 체에 전적으로 tum방사 또 레지 하네 차법이 있네 다 가서 그게 주도서 무식 하네 다 책이 있나 에노 냠법을 그노디 그노로를 냠법만이 찾은 상 차법은 뭐니 찾은 상에 년세 차법이 나도 켜와 있고리스 아니 섬고죠 태야 있고리스 저
So the next major outline of the text that we'll be reading from or addressing is having explained the greatness of the author and the teaching itself. The third outline is how to now proceed with the exposition, teaching and listening to the teaching itself, with what kind of attitudes and states of mind. And here the main point being made is that the reason why we engage in the exposition and listening to the teachings is to really fulfill our aspiration to bring the realization of our immediate and long-term welfare. And in order to bring about that realization of that aspiration successfully, certain conditions needs to be met on the part of both listener and on the part of the teacher, so that whatever is taught and whatever is heard really serves their purpose of becoming as beneficial and as effective as possible. So on the part of the listener, certain conditions need to be created so that your state of mind and your attitude and your motivation for listening to the teachings remain pure, so that it makes you receptive to be beneficial, to benefit from the teachings. And on the part of the teacher also, it is important to make sure that as far as the motivation of the teacher in giving the teaching is concerned, it is unadulterated, it is pure, so that the motivation is to really bring benefit to the student and to the listener. And here, for example, the qualities that are very important are, for example, in the qualities that are listed for